Regards, and welcome to Ryan Rambles You To Rest, the podcast where I talk at length about matters of nearly no urgent need, nor heavy impact on our daily lives, in the interest of helping you there, off to a more peaceful state. Well, dear resters, it has been some time since I have recorded for you what some may refer to, or consider, a regular, full episode of Ryan Rambles You To Rest. I very much appreciate your collective patience in this regard. Much has occurred since our last full episode time together. The major winter events in the United States have taken place. The Superb Owl and the Academy Awards, the 58th and 96th, respectively. I find it exciting to think about how we are very close to the 100th Academy Awards. Our 100th Best Picture of the Year is just around the corner. Also during this time, Ryan Rambles You To Rest, a sleep podcast, has traversed a handful of important YouTube milestones. The first is passing 1,000 subscribers. And for that, I would love to thank you all, dear resters, for being a part of spreading this podcast to a wider audience and sharing quality time together. Not long after that, the podcast was able to join the YouTube Partner Program, which gives us enhanced capability with regard to ad placements. I hope that I will succeed in improving your restful experience and can either minimize the frequency of rest-encroaching ads overall, or else improve their placement for a finer rest experience. How we got there? Of course, you will have noticed if you joined us from the YouTube platform or Instagram, is through the recent publication of what I have called naps. Bite-sized ruminations by yours truly on a variety of topics. These are no longer than 1 minute in duration and come in the popular vertical video format, better known on YouTube as shorts. These shorts are certainly easier to produce on a more frequent basis than full episodes, and although I am completely aware that they are far too short to be effective in the production of restful time, I would still be curious to know how you, dear rester, feel about these brief videos. Of course, I have no intention of replacing our longer visits together with them, but for my own end of things, I like being able to check in a little more often than my schedule normally allows. Besides these pleasing milestones, outside of Ramble's land, we have also passed daylight savings time for most listeners in the United States. By the time this episode is available, perhaps others will have also passed daylight savings time. I know that I am in the minority of people who like daylight savings time. I like it when it gets darker earlier on shorter winter days, and I have an excuse to stay in earlier in the day. I always enjoy the longer days of summertime, when days can go super late, and it's just right for a barbecue, or enjoying a pleasant sit on a bench outdoors with a book, or a friend. Now, it's all pretty mild wherever I have lived in the United States, but I have also traveled to some places where the time zone is such that the days can be way too long in the summer. For instance, my partner and I went to Mont Saint-Michel in Normandy, France. If I recall correctly, the sunset wasn't until close to 11 p.m. in the middle of August. Now that is way too late for the day to go on, if you ask me. The last few full-length episodes of Ryan Rambles You To Rest, a sleep podcast, were amiable ambles, where I ramble on about something or another that I have not planned to discuss. This was in the hopes that I could find a more efficient way of creating episodes for you, dear resters. However, I myself like the format and will return to it another time in the future. If you like those amiable ambles, let me know. Another format I may try out in the future is to run an always-on live stream of older episodes of the show that you can tune into at any time and let it run like a radio station for as long as you want. In this episode, I thought it might be a delight to throw back to a more conventional, traditional format of this podcast experience. Because it's been so long, I thought it would content us both to review a few of your thoughts in Rester Reflections. Then, it's been a full year, at least, since we've embarked on these classic segments. First, really random topics, utilizing the random article button on one of our favorite destinations for knowledge, wikipedia.org. After that, the scroll of benches on my Instagram feed. Before we begin, I would like to recommend that you subscribe to this show on your podcast platform of choice, or YouTube, and now YouTube podcasts. For news and announcements, follow us on Instagram at Ryan Rambles Pod. Our soundtrack is by Disparition. Of course, my voice is what you will hear most during this podcast. However, I think it is important to bid a fair tip of the hat to you, dear resters. In Rester Reflections, I will choose from recent comments on the YouTube channel and share them with you here. Colette O. 7838 writes, I hope you will do new episodes more frequently. You could just read anything you have instructions for in your home. No need to knock yourself out preparing the content. I would rather have more frequent episodes drop than have it take months to have new videos because you were trying to figure out what different things to do. You are a blessing, and anything at all you want to ramble about will be so welcome and effective. We all love you and are so grateful. Medal emoji, thumbs up emoji, white heart emoji, smiley face emoji. Thank you so much for leaving this comment. I too would like to produce episodes more frequently. And I have found that each time I try to figure out a new strategy, it still comes down to going through the process of editing the final product. For an episode that's 90 minutes long, or 2 hours sometimes, it can take a while to cut that out. But I should endeavor to find more time. Coming up in the summer, there are definitely some things that I would like to talk about with you, and I will try to find that extra time. If there's something that seems somewhat urgent, perhaps I'll roll it into a nap. And I will continue to think about ways of doing this that might be faster. As we noted earlier, the amiable amble did not turn out to be the speedy attempt that I thought it would be. And I take your recommendation to simply read more instructions. Doing the reading thing definitely requires a bit less preparation than some of the other segments I like to try out. However, I do like to mix it up. In any case, I appreciate the sentiment, and I agree that it is far too long between episodes. Thank you, Coletto 7838. Our next comment is from Shore Seeker. I've started putting on a video of yours every night, and I can't recall anything you've talked about because I've fallen asleep instantly. Laughing emoji. That is a compliment. You deserve a lot more subscribers. Well, thank you to Shore Seeker. I am very happy that the podcast can be so effective that you fall asleep instantly. To be honest, that's sort of the goal, and it doesn't bother me at all if you guys knock out the moment you put it on. I sometimes hope that that means that it'll stretch out and be useful to you on more than one evening or daytime, depending on what your particular sleeping situation might be. And if you can't recall, then that's probably good too, insofar as maybe this episode might be more repeatable after you've fallen asleep multiple times. Now, you say I deserve a lot more subscribers, and I appreciate that too. The number does seem to keep going up, and I'm always happy that new people are finding the podcast. Of course, I would like to have more, and part of the reason I try some of these other things like shorts, or as I said, I may try out some live streams, is because these different types of things have different ways of finding new people to enjoy the show. It is definitely not to give you something of a lesser episode by giving you the shorts. I hope some people are able to discover this channel through the shorts or the reels on Instagram. And soon maybe there will be a lot more subscribers. I'm very happy to have those of you who tune in regularly regardless. That said, you all are a big part of the growth of this channel and this podcast. Letting your friends know about it is very helpful. Commenting and liking is also very helpful. So I thank you very much, all of you who have subscribed to the channel or followed it on your podcast platform of choice. And thank you again, Shore Seeker, for your comment. The last comment for this episode is from Half Holo. Hello, Ryan. I think your voice is absolutely wonderful. Thank you. For the past week now, I've been listening to your podcast every night to help me go to sleep. Your content is exactly what I was looking for. I was surprised to see that you didn't have a larger following. You're great at what you do. Please continue your stories. Thank you so much, Half Holo. a very, very lovely comment that I very much appreciate. And I do intend to keep telling my stories. I think one of the things that I tend to struggle with is the many different types of segment that I've thought of, and I like so many of them that I'm never sure what's the best one in the moment. And I definitely have enjoyed doing the amiable ambles. And with this particular episode, we're going a little bit back to the classic style that came in earlier episodes, with some segments that we haven't revisited in a very long time. So it's a difficult balance. I feel like the amiable amble, an unprepared, meandering rumination on something, is almost the opposite of reading from an instruction manual. And if I'm honest, reading from an instruction manual sometimes even puts me to sleep while I'm recording the podcast. It's a little less exciting when it goes on. For example, many resters do know that I owe you all a unthrilling conclusion to the Kobo Clara HD e-reader by Rakuten. I should also admit that I did record a third or fourth, boy, I don't remember, another segment of that particular instruction manual that I haven't had the time to fit into another episode. But I'll find a way. I don't believe that it was the conclusion, however, so know that there may be even 2 more installments of the Kobo Clara HD e-reader by Rakuten. Now then, thank you as well, Half Holo, for another wonderful comment. I appreciate all of your comments. Thank you all who take the time to comment, review, subscribe to, and like this podcast wherever you prefer to find it. Your interest and support not only warm my heart, but help more resters like yourselves find their way to this channel and podcast. Now let us continue on our journey. I have found, for some time, that when I want details on a topic, I turn to the Lord's work that our friends at wikipedia.org are up to. It's good to have a centralized place with what I presume to be generally good faith presentation. I also believe that we are extremely lucky in this technological moment fraught with misguided humans and misleading artificial intelligences, that we have a resource of information on general and specific topics at our fingertips, demanding only our curiosity and interest to unlock its gifts. In every really random topic segment, we turn to the internet for inspiration and to randomly take us on a journey of knowledge. Generally speaking, this knowledge is not very useful. We live in an information age, but we have chosen not to be terribly curative on the matter, as is demonstrated when we use the random article button at wikipedia.org. Now, let's see where the button takes us. Our first random article is about the 2005 Notre Dame Fighting Irish football team. Now, I am a football fan. I'm a fan of the sport of football. It's the only sport that I follow even remotely closely, besides the very brief moments I returned to paying close attention to curling during the Winter Olympics. But my energy and general bandwidth to absorb all of the things about football generally leaves me off with only paying attention to the NFL. Because I have a bunch of friends in a fantasy football league, I sometimes do feel like I need to occupy myself with as much of the goings-on in that league as possible. As a result, I tend not to have the patience to follow the collegiate football sports, even though many of the people who are some of the best NFL players come through American college football. Unsurprisingly, even though it's only about 1 year, the 2005 Notre Dame Fighting Irish football team article is relatively lengthy and has many segments. I will not read the entire article, but I will skim around here for some highlights. The summary at the top says this: the 2005 Notre Dame Fighting Irish football team represented the University of Notre Dame in the 2005 NCAA Division 1A football season. The team was coached by Charlie Weis and played its games at Notre Dame Stadium in South Bend, Indiana. The Irish completed the season with a record of 9-3, culminating in an appearance in the Fiesta Bowl, a number 9 ranking in the nation. So this was 21 years ago, or 20, depending on how this is counted. We might find out a little bit more. There is an informational card with the team symbol. The style of the Notre Dame symbol reminds me of the San Francisco Giants, the overlapping letters that make up the symbol. I'm sure there's plenty of colleges and franchises that do that. Now the card here notes that the team did, despite the 9-3 record, lose at the Fiesta Bowl 20-34 versus Ohio State. Well, you gotta look out for those Buckeyes. There are some rankings here, and I'll admit that I don't know what they all mean. It says coaches number 11, AP number 9, which we learned, I guess, was the national ranking. We learned that in the top. The record was 9-3. The head coach was Charlie Weis. We knew that. The offensive coordinator was Michael Haywood. The offensive scheme was pro style. Now that's something you can click through, and I will admit I have truly no idea what pro style means. Maybe that's something I need to look into, and I can provide some updates in a future episode, or you can fill me in. The defensive coordinator was Rick Minter. It was on his first year of second stint, third overall season. The base defense was 4-3 multiple. Captains were Brady Quinn and Brandon Hoyt. And the home stadium, as mentioned before, was Notre Dame Stadium, which I believe says here it seats 80,795 and is grass. So that's an interesting sort of overview. There is a further card below this that shows the rest of the division. It looks as though the other teams in the division are Navy, Army, and Temple. Now, growing up, I know that the Army-Navy game was always a big deal. So I know that little bit about college football. In this case, the Navy was just one win behind Notre Dame. They went 8-4. Army went 4-7. Oof. And then poor Temple, 0-11. Now, I know a little bit about Temple as well. My mom went to Temple, so I have been to Temple University. I was a tiny munchkin at the time and have some occasional semi-distinct memories of what that was like. But that was many, many years before the 2005 college football season, and long before Temple University failed to win a single game in that season. What more can we learn about the 2005 Notre Dame Fighting Irish football team? So this article is informing me that there were coaching changes between seasons, roster changes, and then of course there were some new recruits. There were some awards. I'll read briefly here about recruits, which is, I believe, under the roster changes subheading, or else one of our friends at Wikipedia chose not to be consistent with font sizing for the sections. With poor recruiting being one of the issues that led to the firing of Willingham, Weiss was challenged to coach the Patriots' offense during the day and work on recruiting players for the Irish at night. Boy, that sounds hectic. He took a proactive role in recruiting, including sending 7 of his assistant coaches to a recruit who had decommitted after Willingham was fired. The recruit, however, signed with the Ohio State Buckeyes, who we now know would defeat them in the Fiesta Bowl. Weiss, with some of Willingham's recruits signing also, built a class of 15 recruits, including 5 4-star recruits. Now you'll need to pardon my ignorance once again. I don't know what a 4-star recruit is. I'm guessing that is the close to the top, if not the top, of recruit rankings. 4 stars until this sort of app-based day and age that we live in was a fairly normal maximum ranking. Now it feels like 5 stars is just the norm across sort of everything we do. It's a little bit interesting even that this was something that was a little bit ambiguous before, but now just is almost expected to be a 5-star scenario when you are encountering something that has a rating. I would be curious to know where it caught on first. Was it a big website like Amazon? Or was it the sudden preponderance at one point of DoorDash and Uber Eats and Google reviews all wrestling with each other to be the most popular places to rate and review things? I really don't know, but I'm going to guess that in this college football context of 2005, which predates most of the things that I just talked about, 4-star is swell. Now, there are several descriptions of the various games that they played. In fact, there's a description of each game that they played. But I'm not going to go through each of them. I will note that the USC game notes a few things where I recognize a couple of names. It references the then Trojans head coach Pete Carroll, who I know primarily as the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. And there is also a mention of running back Reggie Bush, who I definitely remember playing in the NFL. But so that we can move on to another random topic, I will read only from the Fiesta Bowl description. With 9 wins and a ranking of 6th in the BCS polls, the Irish were invited to the Fiesta Bowl, held in Sun Devil Stadium in Tempe, Arizona, to face the number 4 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. The BCS appearance was only the 2nd for the Irish, and the first since a 2000 loss to the Oregon State Beavers in the Fiesta Bowl. The Buckeyes, led by coach Jim Tressel and junior quarterback Troy Smith, had a 9-2 record, with losses to BCS contender Penn State and eventual national champion Texas. Although both teams had long football histories, they had only met 4 times previous to this game, the latest in 1996. The Irish took an early lead on a 20-yard run by Darius Walker, but Smith answered for the Buckeyes 3 minutes later with a 56-yard pass to Ted Ginn Jr. to tie the game. Oh, now I remember Ted Ginn Jr. I am primarily a San Francisco 49ers fan, and for a little while there, Ted Ginn Jr. was one of our best kick returners. I remember he had, I think in his rookie year, maybe 2 or 3 touchdowns on a return, and we thought he was pretty swell. I was a little bummed when he left the team, to be honest, because I do like those fun stories of scoring and things happening when you least expect it. After Smith fumbled the ball on the Buckeye 15-yard line, the Irish had another chance to take the lead. However, after not gaining a first down after 3 plays, they attempted a 4th down conversion, during which Quinn was sacked. Without scoring, the quarter ended with the game tied at 7. On the 3rd play of the 2nd quarter, Smith once again scored a touchdown on a 68-yard pass to Ginn to give the Buckeyes a lead they never would relinquish. On the Buckeyes' next drive, Smith brought them to the Irish 15-yard line before his fumble was recovered by the Irish. The Irish, however, couldn't take advantage. And on the Buckeyes' next drive, Smith threw an 85-yard touchdown pass to Santonio Holmes to give the Buckeyes a 21-7 lead. With a blocked field goal attempt by the Buckeyes, the score stayed the same at the half. In the 3rd quarter, the Irish blocked a second field goal attempt and finally took advantage with a 10-yard rushing touchdown by Walker. With a missed extra point and a 40-yard field goal by Josh Houston on the Buckeyes' next possession, the Buckeyes took a 24-13 lead into the 4th quarter. In the 4th, Houston added another field goal, and Walker ran for a 3rd touchdown before Antonio Pittman ran for his own 60-yard touchdown for the final score of the game. The Buckeyes won 34-20, giving the Irish their NCAA record-tying 8th straight bowl game loss. Oh, well, that's a bummer. Notre Dame also finished 2-2 against schools from the Big Ten in 2005. So there you have the 2005 Notre Dame Fighting Irish American Football College team. And a little bit of information about how they lost in the Fiesta Bowl to the Ohio State Buckeyes. Do you have a favorite college football team? Do you follow football? Let me know. Now let's see where the random article button takes us next. Resters familiar with really random topic segments of the past involving Wikipedia will remember that from time to time, if not relatively frequently, we will encounter a very brief article involving terminology and words that I struggle to understand or pronounce. Generally speaking, these are in the fields of science and math, and the next article I have gotten is no exception. However, it is also 1 paragraph long and will not take us very long to go through. And please forgive me in advance for these mispronunciations and future pronunciations that are likely to occur later in this segment. Atractaspis Watsoni. Atractaspis Watsoni. Watson's burrowing asp is a species of snake from the Atractaspis genus native to West and Central Africa. The species was scientifically described by George Albert Bullinger in 1908. It lives in savannas, and they were found up to 800 meters, or 2,600 feet, in elevation. Now, I hope none of you, dear resters, are too terribly afraid of snakes. Snakes can be scary. But this snake, you've heard all of the descriptions about it. It doesn't say what its diet is, or how large it is, or whether it's friendly or dangerous. You may also like snakes, and perhaps consider that maybe this Atractaspis Watsoni is a friendly snake. But I don't truly know. Some snakes can be friendly, usually the ones that live at homes, like their owners or their parents. Now, I'm not generally scared of them, but I won't dwell on this for very long, because as I am somebody who does have fears of spiders in particular, I could understand how other folks might not want to hear more about this. And as I said, there truly isn't more to hear about it. Let's see what's next. Another brief one, and another one that is definitely not my wheelhouse, although I would say it's definitely closer to my wheelhouse than African snakes. This article is for SRX Expansion Board. The SRX are a series of expansion boards produced by Roland Corporation. First introduced in 2000, they are small boards of electronic circuitry with 64 megabyte ROMs containing patches, timbers, and rhythm sets, drum kits. They are used to expand certain models of Roland synthesizers, music workstations, keyboards, and sound modules. More or less, everything else in this article is a model number or specific form of SRX Expansion Board. And before I move on, I may delight us all in recounting the specific expansion boards. SRX-01 Dynamic Drum Kits. SRX-02 Concert Piano. SRX-03 Studio SRX. SRX-04 Symphonic Strings. SRX-05 Supreme Dance. SRX-06 Complete Orchestra. SRX-07 Ultimate Keys. SRX-08 Platinum Tracks. SRX-09 World Collection. SRX-10 Big Brass Ensemble. SRX-12 Classic EPs. And then here there's a jump. and it doesn't indicate here specifically why there is a jump from the first 12, but there is a jump from 12 to the mid-90s. SRX 96, World Collection and Legendary XP Essentials, parentheses Special SRX Board 2008. SRX 97, John Lord's Rock Organ, Special SRX Board 2007. SRX 98, Analog Essentials, Special SRX Board 2006. And finally, SRX 99, Special Wave Expansion, promo released mid-2004. And after that, there's a list of compatible hosts and then references, and the article is pretty much over. I don't have very much to comment on, as I said, given my general ignorance. There is a photo here of the SRX 07, the Ultimate Keys board, and it is an interesting looking chip. There isn't something there for size, but the model number is printed very big, and then there are lots of little chip type things and holes, and it's green, so it looks like the kind of chip you have in mind when you think of a computer chip. But there isn't a sense of scale from looking at it. The article doesn't describe the size. So perhaps if you are out there and you know about the Roland SRX expansion boards, you might be able to come in here and help out the folks at wikipedia.org with some of the further details and context that those of us who have never worked with an SRX expansion board would not know. Now then, moving on. Mount Upton, New York. Another very short one. This one, in fact, is the shortest article I think we may have ever encountered here. Mount Upton is a hamlet on the Unadilla River in the town of Guilford in Chenango County, New York, United States. That is more or less the entire article. The article provides coordinates for Mount Upton, New York, and there is a single photograph from 1911 of a residential home, a very big one, like almost a mansion with a wraparound porch. What looks like the wraparound porch supports a second floor balcony that goes around the house, and there's clearly a third floor above it. So it looks like a very affluent home with a sidewalk, some trees. It's hard to see anything else in the photo that would indicate more information about who lives there or something about the town. The image is of 1104 County Road 37, Mount Upton, New York, 1911. I'm assuming the 1911 is the year here. The only other piece of information besides a list of the municipalities and communities of Chenango County, New York, of which Mount Upton is one of the hamlets, is a notable people section. And here there is one notable person. E.J. Richmond, author, 1825 to 1918. I don't believe I've heard of E.J. Richmond. Perhaps you have, dear rester, and can inform me, as on this journey I won't be clicking further into this article. Moving on. Okay then. We arrive at some entertainment, something in the field of entertainment, something I'm not especially familiar with, though, to be honest. It's in the realm of anime. We have come across the article for Naruto Shippuden Season 8. It's interesting, and we've got sort of our second of this segment article that's a specific period of time for something larger. For example, we didn't have the entirety of Notre Dame football or its history. We just had the 2005 season. And here we are with Season 8 of Naruto. Now, I once again know just about nothing about Naruto other than being generally aware of its existence through some of the time I've worked in the entertainment industry and being aware of Naruto's popularity. But I myself am not a fan or an expert, or can even confirm that I've actually watched more than a continuous moment or two of Naruto content, besides perhaps some video game related things. Now, this being Season 8 has mainly just a description of the season itself, and then all of the episodes, and then some specific information about release dates or home video. And we don't need to go into all of that. It's just brief enough that I think that I can read the main body of the article, and of course in the process severely mangle some Japanese. The 8th season of the Naruto Shippuden anime series is directed by Hayato Date and produced by Pierrot and TV Tokyo. The 8th season aired from March to August 2010. The season follows the Akatsuki leader Pain invading the Leaf Village and attempting to kidnap Naruto Uzumaki. It is referred to by its DVDs as the chapter of Two Saviors. Aniplex released the 6 volumes between October 7th, 2010 and March 2nd, 2011. While the volumes contains all the episodes 170 and 171 were skipped to the 6th volume. The English dub of this season premiered on February 16th on Neon Alley and concluded on March 30th, 2013. The season would make its English television debut on Adult Swim's Toonami programming block and premiere from April 2nd to October 1st, 2017. It's kind of interesting to think about how this originally was released on air in 2010, and it didn't really fully find its way to English television until 6 or 7 years later, even though it was on DVD not too long after that. Perhaps our younger resters don't remember what a DVD is, and maybe we can take some time together in a future episode to explore the history of that compact disc-based video medium that, if you ask me, really did change things before streaming happened. The last sort of great home video moment was with DVD, when many distributors and publishers all over the world just scraped the very bottoms of the barrels to find as many movies as they could put out on DVD. And while that doesn't sound that important, it meant that a lot of forgotten movies, a lot of movies that were difficult to acquire or hard to come by in formats before DVD, were coming out of the walls. And it was something of a home video renaissance. I definitely wouldn't mind talking about that subject matter further. But before then, we have one more paragraph on Naruto Shippuden Season 8. The season contains 4 musical themes, 1 opening, and 3 ending themes. The opening theme is Tomai Data Sakai, translation, formerly Transparent World, by Motohiro Hata, while the ending themes are For You by Azu, used for only the first 2 episodes of the season, then Jitensha, Bicycle, by Ore Ska Band, used in episodes 154 to 166, and Utakata Hanabi, Transient Fireworks, by Supercell, used for the remaining episodes. The 4th feature film, Naruto Shippuden, the movie, The Lost Tower, was released on July 31st, 2010. The broadcast versions of episodes 172 to 175 include scenes from the film in the opening themes, while still retaining the music Tomai Data Sakai. And there you have all of the information. One moment besides what is on this card. The card shows one image of a DVD cover for Season 8. It notes that there were 24 episodes. The original network is TV Tokyo, and the original release was between March 25th and August 26th, 2010. So a little bit more specific information than we got in the summary. Well, that was a relatively short and not too terribly mangled article by myself, but we must move on. And here we are one more time with something of the entertainment variety. A very brief article about an older German film, Alibi, 1955. Alibi is a 1955 West German crime drama film directed by Alfred Weidenmann and starring O.E. Hasse, Martin Held, and Hardy Kruger. It was shot at the Tempelhof Studios in West Berlin and on location in Hamburg. The film's sets were designed by the art director Rolf Zehetbauer. There is only a cast list and a synopsis, really, that follows this, and there is an information card. There's a movie poster that is not a high-quality image. The poster makes it look like it's a courtroom drama, or at some point there's an audience. I can't tell if the audience is for a courtroom or maybe it's a classroom. It's hard to say. There's a man in a suit standing in front of the audience, and then there's another man in the foreground on the right next to the title Alibi, and he's just got a cigarette in his hand. So it doesn't really tell you very much, except that somebody in the film probably has an alibi, and that probably means that we're looking at a courtroom. The film card has some additional information about other people that worked on it, and since we probably will not be getting into the cast list, I will briefly read from the information card here. Directed by Alfred Weidemann, written by Herbert Reinecker, Alfred Weidemann, and Herbert Reinecker. It's definitely unusual to have the writer listed twice. I imagine that's some sort of accident, unless Herbert Reinecker had another brother or parent named Herbert Reinecker and shared the same name. Only one of the two instances of Herbert Reinecker here on the card is hyperlinked, so we could find out more if we truly wanted to. But in the interest of time, I will now read further. Produced by Friedrich A. Mantz and Helmut Ungerlund, starring O.E. Hasse, Martin Held, and Hardy Kruger, who we've already mentioned. Those are the top three billed. The cast list that is not on the card is quite extensive. It's rather long. It's at least 25 people. Cinematography by Helmuth Ashley, edited by Karl Otto Bartning, music by Hans Martin Majewski, and the production company was Fama Film, distributed by Europa Filmverleih. The release date was the 30th of December, 1955. Runtime is 103 minutes. The country is West Germany. And the language, of course, is German. Synopsis. A hotshot newspaper reporter is summoned for jury service. Well, this is a relatable problem to have, being summoned for jury service. I'm not sure the last time I was summoned for jury service, but it has been in the last couple of years for sure. Last year at my place of work, many of my co-workers coincidentally had jury service within, I would say, just a month or two of each other. It was very surprising. Jury duty is never something that you really look forward to, although I don't really mind it myself. I don't mind going down to the courthouse and sitting there. You know, you bring a book and have time to read, and then you go through the process sometimes of jury selection. I've been through the process a few times. I will admit that I prefer to be let go. One time I was in a room full of people, and they called everybody's names over the course of maybe half an hour. It took a very long time because there were a lot of us. And those people filed out of the rooms as their names were called. And after all of the names were called, there were only maybe 5 or 6 of us left in the room. And they told us that we had to wait until everyone had left. And then after everyone had left, they announced that we had completed our jury service by signing up. Now, that's pretty lucky. The 6 of us couldn't have been more than a small percentage of the overall people. So the chances of being in that group that got to go without even seeing a courtroom, those are pretty small odds. However, the most recent time that I went, I did actually get all the way to the jury booth for selection. So they kept going through people, and as people would get dismissed, they would put more people in the jury box, and I got added to the jury box. And it's the first time I can remember being through the whole process in terms of seeing other people go through it. And it was definitely somewhat comical to have so many people get interviewed by the attorneys or the judge that were really trying to get out of jury duty. And some of them were allowed to get out, and some would be required to reschedule, if I remember correctly. And I was nervous when I went up to the booth because I just thought, I'm not going to put up one of these fronts. I've always thought that if I can afford to, if I don't have a hardship situation, that I should accept my role as a juror in the event that I get chosen. At various times in my life, I've been unable to afford being a juror, or worked somewhere where they would cover my time off as a juror, or simply had the free time. So I feel like if I can, I should. And in this case, I was the whole time mentally preparing myself for that moment. And they asked me a number of questions, and I answered them truthfully and, didn't demonstrate I didn't think any particularly clear bias or obviously disqualifying behavior. And as I said, I made no attempt to dismiss myself. But after they had interviewed everybody that was replaced in the box, they announced who was being dismissed. And I forget whether it was the defense or the prosecution, but one of them dismissed me. And I have to be honest, I was a little disappointed because they don't give you feedback. They don't tell you why you were dismissed, and I was sort of like wondering, was I not qualified in some way, or too qualified in some way, or, well, who knows? Obviously there can be any reason why somebody doesn't want you on a jury. But I felt like my time had come, that I had no particular reason not to be there, that I didn't have any particular association with the subject matter of the case or the people involved in it. And I like to think of myself just in general as a fairly reasonable human being, and would give any given case a matter of consideration. And maybe that's something that one of the two sides simply didn't want. Somebody that might have an opinion, that might argue for it, might not be just simple, docile, and easy to accept whatever was given to me by the attorney. That I might be overly critical is something that occurred to me. Too reasonable, perhaps, too critical. Maybe we need professional jurors or something. I don't think that's a job I would take, but professional jurors would solve some problems. Now, back to the synopsis of Alibi, the West German crime drama film from 1955. You will recall that a hotshot news reporter has been summoned to jury service. Young Harold Meinhardt is charged with killing Frau Overbeck, the wife of a very successful scientist, with whom he had been having an affair. The journalist, Peter Hansen, is the only member of the jury to vote against Meinhardt's conviction. He launches a newspaper campaign to demonstrate his innocence and sets out to investigate the real killer. Well, that does sound awfully dramatic. I suppose that, I'm not a journalist, but going back to my personal experience, maybe one of the lawyers had recently watched Alibi, this 1955 West German crime drama film, and was concerned that they might have a juror like this Peter Hansen, who was the only one to vote against Meinhardt's conviction. I have a background working in journalism, but I'm not a journalist per se, and I wouldn't do a newspaper campaign. So I think less dangerous. But, I'll bet that one of the attorneys in this situation who had chosen journalist Peter Hansen to be on the jury was very sorry that they had done so. So maybe there is a lesson learned there that you, just historically speaking, from 1955 to now, almost 70 years later, think about how maybe from a lawyer's point of view, you don't want people like this that are going to go out of their way to try and find the real killer. You want something that's open and shut and move on. Well, without having seen the film, and obviously having a little bit of a dim memory of my own actual jury duty, it's not really fair to make these assumptions in either case. Although it does occur to me on the tail of all of this that I should note that it's worth watching the reality television show Jury Duty, which came out last year, in which a single person was selected for jury duty, and everyone else involved in the case, including the other jurors and lawyers and the judge, were all actors. The concept of it definitely toes some ethical lines a little bit, but it was an interesting show because of how sincere this one unbeknownst juror was, and how also sincere the show creators were in not being evil, not doing substantially horrible pranks or embarrassing things, it's still very bizarre and toes an ethical line that should probably be talked about, but it does seem that everybody involved tried to do the right thing. And I won't spoil it for you if you haven't seen it. You should consider watching Jury Duty from 2023, and maybe consider watching Alibi from 1955. Well, that was certainly an interesting journey. Useful or useless knowledge in any of our own lives. To be determined. I hope these random topics weren't too intriguing either. But if you have some thoughts on them, the 2005 Notre Dame Fighting Irish football team, Atractaspis Watsoni, the snake, the SRX Expansion Board for Roland keyboards, Mount Upton, New York, Naruto Shippuden Season 8, or Alibi, the 1955 film. Let me know. Now I will have to confess to you, dear resters, that I myself have not posted a photograph of my own depicting a bench in a few months. I am most definitely overdue to set aside some time to consider some of the sitting situations I have encountered in my recent travels and wanderings. Something that draws me personally to the appreciation of benches is their universality. They are everywhere in the world you go. Every bench has a purpose to provide rest, like Ryan Rambles You To Rest, a sleep podcast, and so much more, from expressions of ideas to utility and convenience, and also to provide a place for thoughtful reflection in a beautiful location. Of course, the most stunning views often yield the most stunning photos, but I even take pleasure in the banality of benches. A mall bench, an airport bench, a bench in any waiting room. Benches are truly universal, and we don't need to share a language to share a bench. For the scroll, we will now return to my Instagram feed of bench photos by other bench enthusiasts and appreciators across the globe. Our first bench is from user parkbenchspotting, and the bench is located in Manaroia, Cinque, Terre, Italy. Now, this bench person, like myself, does like to include a review, and this bench has a 4.8 out of 5 rating. And before we go into the details on it, I will describe a few things for you. Parkbenchspotting has chosen to open this as a carousel, and it opens with the view from the bench itself. So we don't know from the start here what the bench looks like. We just have the view from the bench. And in this case, it's actually very striking. Probably one of the most singularly striking photos I've seen as a view from a bench in terms of everything that's going on, in terms of how much it seems like there is to absorb. And I'm looking at this on my phone, and it's a very wide photo, so there's a lot of little details that I won't even be able to communicate to you. But the view is spectacular. This is a coastal, hilly, rocky, cliffy coastal view, and it's looking up along the coast. So there isn't a lot of the water or the ocean in the photo so much as there is mostly the cliffside. And there's very white water washing up against the cliffs. And from this bench, you can see the green on top of the hills, but as they come down and they're very kind of bumpy and shrubbery-y, there is a town, a city of sorts, perhaps a village, maybe you might say. But it's these stacked, almost Lego-like houses. Like they're just little blocks, and they're all stacked on top of each other because it's very hilly. And all of these buildings appear to be built very close together. Perhaps a lot of them are conjoined, but they're all painted different colors. And so there's a lot of mostly pastels, some yellows and beiges, and a light purple here and a blue, some peach and pink. And they all kind of blend together to create this colorful hillside. If you look at it just stepping back, as I am because the photo itself is relatively small, it almost looks like somebody painted a rocky hilltop, and that there's not actually houses there, but it's just painted. So they're all stacked up, very, very steep hills. In the deeper background, there's another small run of houses stacked over each other. It looks like it must be a wild place to visit because it's so steep. And in the sort of mid-foreground, you can see that there is a road that goes down to perhaps a launch of some kind. At first glance, I thought that it was just sort of rocky all the way down to the water, but as I'm looking more closely, it does seem like there's actually some stone infrastructure built into the cliffs. Like, I can't tell if it's carved or if it's built that way. But it's a very striking image. It looks to be perhaps an overcast day. So it looks kind of maybe chilly. It looks maybe cold. It might be hot, but it doesn't look like a beautiful sunny day. It's got a kind of just wet, chilly vibe to it. But it is a spectacular view. I think I would be very pleased for this to be the view after taking a hike, maybe staying in this very pretty little town. And then, in the afternoon, after breakfast or lunch, walking out along the coast and then finding this bench and having this very cool view of the town behind. You can definitely see why Park Bench Spotting took the photo. So now I'm going to examine the bench situation. Now this is interesting. The bench itself is not, it looks like it's not exactly on the walkway, it appears to be part of a somewhat manicured intentional spot. Like, it's not just a trail that has a bench on it. There's a lip of a sort of rock tile curb, like a step up to the bench, that makes it look like maybe this town has a park that you can go to, and the park is probably tended to, or if not tended to, it's at least, was built at one time. In fact, on the subject of being tended to, this bench just looks like it's kind of off the walkway, or sidewalk maybe, but it's backed up against a some kind of I think a rock wall, and the rock wall is heavily overgrown by some form of shrubbery, so much so that the left side of the bench itself is actually partially obscured. If you were walking with some friends and you stopped to look at this spectacular view, you might need to take turns sitting on the bench and enjoying it, because imagining that it's approximately what we might call average bench size, it can probably only seat 2 of the 3 people that would sit on it. And even then, I think person number 2 on that bench is going to have, maybe some bushes in their hair. The construction seems to be, I can't tell if it's metal or wood that's been painted with like a silvery sheen. It definitely looks out of place. The kind of curbside that I was talking about below it is very sort of boxy and angularly crafted. It's very rectangular. So the modern feel of that particular surrounding is not at odds with the bench having a kind of metallic quality. But given the beautiful coastal view that it has, it seems a little bit out of place. It looks like also that there may be a planter to the right that's holding some kind of reedy, perhaps semi-tropical looking plant or tree that's growing there. You could definitely sit here in a pinch, but somebody does need to come through here with some shears and excavate this bench from where it is. Now there is just to continue a little bit about the construction. Like I said, it looks metallic, but the seat looks a little bit textured, and I can't tell if it's from slats. It might just be a plastic bench. And the bush it's growing around the top and the left side, but it's also growing in underneath the bench. And of the 2 legs, you can only see the one on the far right. So it needs some love, let's just be honest. So there's one more photo. I'm going to advance to the one more photo and see what we get. Oh, okay. There's an inscription here. Presumably this is a dedication. Cozzani Severo, It's not a very elegant inscription. It looks like it could have almost been done by hand, but it's not a vandalism. It could be stamped, but again, it looks somewhat handwritten. Cozzani Severo, and then N 2210-1918. So I'm going with that is perhaps date of birth for Cozzani Severo. Usually when there's a memorial bench, you get a little bit more context. 1918 is some time ago now. 125 years ago. It doesn't look like the bench itself could be that old, but maybe it's actually stone. And this is stone or some kind of concrete, maybe. Because this close-up on the inscription definitely looks to have some weather wearing around it on the surface that doesn't look plastic at all. And the likelihood that there would be a fully plastic bench in 1918 is pretty low, unless the dedication is simply to this person who was born then. Okay, well, let's see what the review says. So this is a 4.8 out of 5. Pros. This is pretty much the ideal park bench. It's unique. It's got a plaque dedicated to Cozzani Severo, placed in front of the serene cliffside village of Manaroia. Honestly doesn't get much better than that. It definitely shows from the pictures. Cons. Could use a hedge trimmer on the left side. Well, I feel like I may have described this relatively well, given the review. The pictures of this bench definitely tell the story very well. Our next bench is another 3-panel. We will have to see what the 3 panels are, as in this case, it does not begin with the view, it begins with the bench. This is from user Iseebenches. The location over the photo is Jindyandy Mill, or Jindyandy Mill. I'm not sure which, and I don't know that name. So this I might have to do a little bit of research on and get back to you. So this is interesting. It's one of these things where sometimes a bench feels incongruous to its environment a little bit. And not necessarily in a bad way, but it doesn't seem to quite fit. So the photo is primarily of the bench, but there's a deep focus background. And the bench is on a very well-kept grassy area with a tree behind it that seems to be almost tilting from the wind. Behind that is a parking lot. And the parking lot it's like kind of maybe a gravelly parking lot. And interestingly, the 3 cars that are visible in the photo in the background have all pulled into this gravelly parking lot, but then pulled off of the gravel and parked on the grass on the opposite side of the gravel from where the bench is. And there's a kind of falling apart, maybe somewhat dilapidated fence that is also kind of maybe 5 or 6 feet closer to us than to the parking lot. Weather-worn looking fence. It's just sort of tilting over, and maybe it's a little mossy. It looks like a very sunny summer day, though. The shadows are very hard on the ground, and there's a blue sky and a telephone pole in the deeper background. So now the incongruous thing I was talking about, this looks like a fairly, I don't know, generic park, I want to say, from the angle. But this bench, and it's time to describe the bench, looks extremely old, chunky stone, concrete maybe, very ornate designs on it. It's a bench that looks like it belongs at a, maybe at a church or a giant monument in some European building, or in a manicured yard somewhere, like you might think of in a garden in Versailles or something. It doesn't look like a casual park bench. It looks like a very meant to have to give a feeling of maybe aristocracy. But here it's just sitting in this grass patch, on this grass patch. It's not very thick grass either. It's kind of spotty. Next to this gravel parking lot. And what adds to the incongruousness too is that this bench does not look like it has been taken care of or cleaned in a very, very long time. It is mossy. It is discolored. It doesn't look like something you'd want to sit on. It has definitely seen better days. From its stone construction, it looks pretty solid, but it also looks kind of gross. The two stone legs, appear to be pretty intact. It's really hard to make out what their real design is. They kind of both have a almost Corinthian pillar quality to them, holding up this slightly curved stone slab on top, and then the slab has around its edges like a kind of filigree pattern. Yeah, it's interesting. It just looks like maybe somebody had it laying around, and just gave it to the local park. The Jindyandy Mill local park, or who knows. Anyway, let's see what the other panels can tell us. And there's also a further caption here from Iseebenches, and we can see whether that sheds any additional light. Okay, so it looks like this series of photos isn't going to be focused on just the one bench. The second image is of a gazebo with some trees around it and a clearing. Again, very light grass. And the gazebo appears to be of, relatively recent wood construction. But it is flanked on both sides by some mossy Cupid statues, 2 of them. One is Cupid, and then the other is another sort of cherub with a lyre or a harp, something that it's cradling and strumming. And then sort of hidden past some flowers to its left. I see something colorful that might be a table, but I can't tell. So that's that image. There's no bench to speak of in this photo. And then we will look here at the third and final photo. Okay, now we get one more bench. So this is, again, another, this patchy, grassy stuff. There's trees in the background, heavy foliage, some very large-leafed plants. Look like maybe like an out-of-place tropical plant, maybe. Like this is a arboretum of some variety. I can see behind that tree line that there is maybe a continuation of the parking lot or another parking lot. Judging from where the shadows are pointing, it might be a different parking lot. The ground is mostly shaded here. Hard sun is poking through, and there is another one of these benches, and presumably this is what they look like when they're not completely mossy. And it is accompanied by a table, a round table with a pedestal, kind of bulging center. Almost looks like a vase with a disc on top. Definitely both have seen a lot of weather, but this isn't quite as tragic as the first bench. And it's dirty. Again, you probably wouldn't want to sit on it, but definitely have a better view now of the legs on the bench. They're very ornately designed. They're lots of carving, definitely a lot of thought went into these legs, and less so on the top for sure. There's like sort of a clamshell shape, something else that has almost like a coat of arms quality to it. It's interesting. It's more clear from this image that the bench is curved sort of inward. There's a concave quality to it, as though if you had a series of them, you might make a circle with these benches. But it's not an extreme curve. You would probably need, I don't know, a lot of them to make a proper circle. In other words, the curvature is relatively mild. Okay, well, let's see what Iseebenches has to say. Visited this amazing antique market today. Okay. So there's an antique market happening at some kind of park. Saw a few good benches. Okay, well, there's our context. Well, I have to say, if you're going to an antique market and you have some relatively nice grounds to walk around and there's some very old ornate benches, then you may as well walk around and take a few photos. And this last one, I think I would maybe be able to sit on it. You wouldn't want to be sitting in white pants, but I think you could sit on it and maybe get away with it. Especially if you have maybe, for sure, like a towel in the car, something to sit on. Well, thank you, Iseebenches and Jindyandy Mill. Let's see what's next. Our next image is, I think, what probably a lot of us would almost imagine exactly if we were asked to picture a North American coastal view. other than the bench that's in it, it is pretty classic. It's almost like it's complementary to our first photo, the park bench spotting photo from Italy. This one is again looking up the coast, and there is some white wavy water crashing up against some rocks. But this view is the classic lighthouse and lighthouse keeper house on the end of a rocky sort of cliff thing, peninsula jutting out into the water. From the look of things, I would say, though, that judging by the size of the building and the size of the lighthouse, that the building might have additional uses than just being the home of a lighthouse keeper. It looks a little bit on the large side to be only a lighthouse keeper home. This from user thebenchstagram, and this is Portland, Maine. So definitely a different part of the globe. Yeah, the house, the building, maybe even set of buildings next to the lighthouse has 2 to 3 stories, lots of windows, and then there's a very small building off to the left of the lighthouse. From zooming in a bit, I can see a lot of people milling around, so it's probably a bit of a tourist destination in Portland, Maine. Yeah, if I was betting, I'd say there's some further use. Maybe it's an event venue, maybe that was added later. Generally speaking, you don't see very large buildings for lighthouse keepers unless there is an additional use for the facility. Lighthouse keepers tend to be, the dwellings tend to be accommodating to, usually not more than 2 to 3 families tops. And I think even in that situation, it would be because of some form of additional facility use. But I could be wrong. Maybe I need to research the lighthouses of Portland, Maine. But it is a very classic looking photo. The water is a deep blue and it recedes to a hazy line with the sky, and the sky is blue. There's sort of a white haze line that goes behind this white lighthouse with a little black top on it. And then the houses themselves are white houses with red tile, maybe roofs. And then there's just a gray cliffside with a little bit of greenery growing on and around it. Now, where this photo is taken from is a little bit down the coast, and then clearly there's a little sitting area. Maybe this is the edge of the parking lot that takes you to the lighthouse. There is a fence that separates us from the water, and we're probably up about 15-20 feet. Fence with a railing. I can't see if there's a way down to the water. And then there's just a modest bench here, some gravel, and it looks like an intentional, tiled rock platform in front of it. So it's a bit of a vista point. You're definitely meant to be able to gaze out into the distance. But the bench itself is relatively unspectacular. It's just a slab rectangle with 2 slab square legs on something that's embedded in the gravel, maybe another slab. Now, I don't know if I can really pinch zoom this well enough, but it does look as though the rectangular slab for the bench itself has an inscription on it, but I can't read it. Very interesting. Looks like very solid construction. It's backless, so you're not going to lean back and rest there for very long, but another thing that's interesting about it, though, is that the rectangle of the bench, the seat of the bench, is almost parallel with the coastline, which is to say that if you were sitting on this bench facing in either direction, either towards the water or presumably towards the parking lot, you wouldn't be looking at the lighthouse. You'd be looking away from the lighthouse. So it does seem like a strange placement of the bench. Perhaps there are other benches along the trail up to the lighthouse. We can't see that because it's a little bit out of frame. And the bench is really at the bottom side of the photo itself, so we can't see what's off to the left towards the water, whether there's another thing there to view. And perhaps the photographer simply captured both the lighthouse landmark and the bench, and maybe those two don't go together necessarily. Maybe they don't belong. It's hard to say. But either way, this Portland, Maine lighthouse photo makes me wish that there is a parking lot there, and that the building at the lighthouse is some kind of maybe seafood restaurant. I could go for like a fish and chips or a bowl of clam chowder. It seems like that kind of a place. Well, either way, it's a very nice photo from the benchstagram. Our next bench is from Loveagoodbench. This one is at Shearwater Lake, Longleat Estate. This image is quite pastoral. The bench takes up almost the entire bottom third of the frame, but it blends right with a grass line. The bench itself, to be honest, is not very exciting. It's a long 3-slat green bench, very kind of generic park bench. It also looks like the legs might be metal, painted to match. The whole thing might be metal, honestly. But presumably so that they can be well installed into the ground. This is a potentially occasionally muddy environment. Here it's a partially cloudy day with a little bit of blue poking through the clouds. The photographer has chosen to be down close to bench level, and the front edge of the bench runs right up against the front edge of the grass, and then beyond is a mirror-like lake with very light ripples in it. Just in the deep background you can see a little bit of coast on the right and a bit of coast on the left, and then the clouds, and all of it is reflected in this mirror-like lake. It's very pretty. And it's somewhat interesting, too, how the the two tree lines are kind of incongruous. On the right side, there is the coastal side is got a host of trees that are without their leaves. Like, it still has this kind of wintry vibe to it. And then the other side, on the kind of further end, is all evergreens. So it's very kind of interesting that the two sides of the lake have very different trees. That this is also a backless bench means that the view itself is not obscured. It doesn't look particularly relaxing, but the environment is very pretty. Looks like it's probably along a trail that goes around the whole lake. Now, if I zoom in, it looks as though a path may go around the right side of the lake, and I think I can maybe make out a couple of lakeside buildings, but I'm not positive. They look like buildings, but they might be smaller. They might be like a shed, and maybe there's a sign if it's not a building. Very deep in the background, and it's a pretty wide shot. It also appears that there are a handful of repeated small structures close to the water's edge that are small. I think they might be some type of park bench or picnic table or something of those varieties, or maybe even fire pits. It's hard to tell. But it does look very nice. Patchy grass is growing up around the legs, and I think these are single legs, as in just posts. There's probably some kind of buried foundation for this bench. But it looks very nice. Let's see what Loveagoodbench has to say. An Easter family walk around Shearwater Lake. Cake and coffee reward. Well, that does sound very nice. Nothing like a good little weekend walk with the family with some great views and a bench. And cake and coffee as a reward is pretty sweet too. Well, thank you, Loveagoodbench, for your Shearwater Lake view that you shared with us. Our next bench is from park_benches, who I believe may have had a photo or two the last time we had a scroll of benches on my Instagram feed. In fact, I'm 100% positive that we've done park_benches, because this photo comes from Trobe University in Bendigo. Listeners of the episode following that scroll may recall that we talked a bit more about Bendigo after I did some research. That research is in episode 6 of the podcast and covers the Chico roll. If you want to know more about the Chico roll, you can listen to episode 6. And if you would like to hear the description of that bench, you can listen to episode 5. So now on with the present at Trobe University, Bendigo. This is kind of a fun image. It is outdoors, and it's got a very classically university vibe to it. In the foreground, there's some sunny, green, spiky grass, or low plants. Then just beyond them is our bench and the side of a very modern university building. It's full of angles. There's a brick finish to the main pillar. This is the corner of the building. There is a brick style to the main pillar of the side of the building and along the base of the building as well. But then there are a lot of horizontal lines that make up some shade, some cement division between the first floor and the second floor, and we can only really see the first floor and really just this edge of it. The star of the photo is the bench. And then there is what looks like a decorative blue slat on the second floor, like it would be a balcony, but it's just the kind of look of a balcony. And then in between the first and second floors, on two sides of this boxy brick column are bulbous round sconces that look like they might provide decent light at night. The bench just appears to be on a stone slab surrounded by probably wood chips or something. And it's, I guess maybe the path outside of this university building is not paved. It looks like it's just a wood chip path or some kind of dapple. Maybe it's just dirt. It seems like a slightly odd place, but a university is a good environment to find benches in all sorts of configurations. Also interesting is, actually one of my favorite things about this photo is that the left-hand side of the image, once you get past the edge of the building, you can see sort of into the distance. There's a little bit of hillside, and there is, up the hillside, there's stairs that go up the hillside, and you can see a sign, and the sign is probably some informational signage about what building it is, and then maybe some other signage about no parking, or, looks like maybe a no parking sign, so clear to keep the area available for pedestrians. But one of my favorite things about this image is that up the hill, there's the trees, there's a little bit of blue sky, but back down the hill, right in between the hill and the university building itself, is another bench. And it's always exciting to see more than one bench in a photo, especially like this one is almost hiding out. The very far right edge of the bench is slightly obscured, making it look a little bit like it's peeking. Now, these two benches are of fundamentally different design, and I suppose it's my responsibility here to describe them. So, the foreground hero bench is on this stone slab. It's a chromish metal frame on either end, single post metal legs that have a flat metal base, and then that flat metal base is screwed in or bolted into the ground. Looks like kind of a one piece for the ends. They have some kind of flat looking metal backing that goes up to support, and there's a center support as well. They must connect in the middle. So they have these flattish metal armrests as part of the post build. And then the bench itself, it has a back, and it looks to be wooden slat. Probably thin slats, about 10 that make the back, and then probably another 5 or so that make the seating. Or maybe it's just 3 and they're thicker for the seating. It's a little bit hard to tell from the angle. Honestly, for something that has a kind of modern feel, it does also look like a comfortable bench to sit in. Looks to be in good condition. Relatively well taken care of, not like some of the other benches we've already seen. University benches should get enough play and should be taken care of, I think, to foster that educational environment. Now, the other bench is quite the contrast. It has the same post action going on, like it's 2 individual legs holding it up, and it must be embedded in some kind of cement underneath all the dirt or wood chips or whatever. But it doesn't have any arms. It looks to be a little bit tilted back, and the slats appear to be vertical. If I'm betting, this looks like a metal bench, and there's a pleasing curvature to the slats that are there. It looks like it might actually even be more comfortable than the hero bench, but weirdly facing the building. From this angle, it almost looks like it's just a bench that's facing a brick wall, and that just seems odd. Although, if you're going to school and you're at a university and you just need somewhere to sit, it doesn't necessarily matter whether your view is of a wall. Maybe you've got some reading to finish up. Or maybe you just need a little nap. Or a snack. Or whatever it is, that it doesn't matter that you're facing a wall. I have a feeling this isn't really facing a wall, but we can't see around the corner. It could be facing a beautiful mural. Or another bench, who knows? In any case, I think that's most of what there is to say about this image from park_benches at Trobe University in Bendigo. I will add the caption. This is a well-educated park bench that likes both business and technology. So this must be the business and technology building, or this is the business building or the technology building, and the other is behind us, because I can see in the reflection of one of these windows another brick wall behind us. Mysteries of La Trobe University, Bendigo, brought to us by park_benches. Now then, that was a number of very good bench photos for us to consider. Just 5 for this sitting. Normally we do 8 to 10, but there were several extra photos in a couple of these. So we probably looked at the same number of pictures together. Well, I hope for my own end of things that I can take the time to add some of my own bench photos back into Instagram and give something back, so to speak. But for now, I think these 5 are good. Thank you to the photographers who took them, and thank you to all of you resters for listening. Do you have a favorite bench somewhere? Let me know. I think we'll leave it here for this episode. We've had some time with the random article button on Wikipedia, and we return to a scroll of benches on my Instagram feed. A very classic episode, if you will. I hope that you were adequately rambled to rest and are not hearing what I am saying right now. However, if for some reason you are conscious at this time, I will leave you with these parting words. Kind. Flow. Whimsical. Spell. High. Oven. Arrange. Crush. Territory. And rural. Thank you again. I am your host, Ryan. Music has been by Disparition. And until we meet again, may your days be stress-free and your nights be restful.